Our next guest is a seasoned diplomat and the current chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Mr. Saalman Jacobs. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to this special tribute broadcast.
Thank you very much.
Talk to us about the circumstances under which the news of Dr. Geingob's death reached you on the 4th of February 2024, a day that has been described as one of the darkest in the nation's history.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here. When one looks back on that day, it's something that strikes us in different ways as a nation. But particularly for myself, I was at home together with my wife. And in our usual way, sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night. And this time around, it was my wife who woke up and saw the news. It was sometime after 1. And she woke me up and said, "Man, this is something I see. Please, let's confirm." And then when I look at it, I was also taken aback. We did not expect it, and you cannot immediately confirm it's like that. So I was a little bit taken aback, had the reservations. We saw some of the comments below, some mentioned it as fake news. But then I said, if it is the case, then definitely there will be an announcement. So I took the remote and I put on the TV. And there I saw our vice president that time, or acting president that time, was announcing.
On NBC television?
On NBC television. And it struck us. We realized it is true. He was larger than life, and it was unexpected. We never thought Geingob will be the one to leave this time. Whatever we may have said about him, there was one thing that we knew as a nation, that we were under very trusted hands of leadership. That is something we took it for granted, if one could put it that way, because of many comments that may have been seen throughout that period of his leadership. So sometimes we take it for granted that he will be there, he is around, we can say whatever we want. Sometimes we do it also the same with our children, with our parents.
We take them for granted.
We take it for granted. And it was only when this happened that it struck us as a nation. And the outpouring of love, of emotions, one could say it's part of that. We were faced by the reality that he is no more. And I think it is in that light that we really felt. And I personally felt, because I also work with him.
When did you first meet the late Dr. Geingob?
You know, after independence of Namibia in 1990, I was still outside of the country because I was studying in Asia. And I returned towards the end of 1990. And then 1991, I joined Foreign Affairs.
As it then was called?
Yeah, as it was called that time. So, you know, we went through training. We used to go sometimes to State House with state visits from dignitaries from somewhere else. But you will see him always far as someone who may be visiting. This person is maybe visiting the founding president, and he's also invited to be part of it. So sometimes you will see him, but I never had that direct contact that time. The first time we met was 1993, when he came to Paris, France. We were at the embassy of Namibia.
Were you stationed in France at the time?
Yes, that time I was posted to France, and then we were there. I was not the ambassador, I was the first secretary. But then when we were introduced to him, he was saying his famous word when he sees some of us very short, he will always say, "Oh, these short people." So he said, "You mean you short people are the one running this embassy?" Because the ambassador, Ipumpu now, he's chief of protocol now, was the ambassador at that time.
So the reference also related to the good ambassador?
It could have been.
Yeah, one doesn't know. Yeah.
But then he saw him, myself, and also others, second secretary, third secretary, and so. So these short people but running the embassy. That was the first kind of encounter we had, and after that we had many encounters where I introduced myself, and he extensively asked me about, the issues that I see here, politics, also in the South, and how it unfolded itself. And we had lengthy time.
Are you a son of the southern soil?
Yes, I'm
Very
also
well.
from the South.
I didn't want to be presumptuous.
Yes, so he asked me about some of the issues that were there, and I had to explain. And that is the first time where we had really a time to spend together, hear one another's views. And that is the first time, I should say, I met him.
Very well.
Subsequently, of course, when I came back, I was, besides being the foreign relations officer, sometimes we were also protocol officers at events and so sometimes you will be assigned to him. But prominently, again, I was assigned to him when he became the first prime minister. So, not the first, second time when he became the prime minister.
Prior to becoming president?
Prior to becoming the president. The day he became the vice president of the SWAPO party, actually it started on that day, because the chief of protocol that time told me, as the Congress finished, please accompany him, because he was going to the SWAPO party headquarters to celebrate, and from there he was...
A new regime had started, basically.
A new regime started, basically. So that is how I started with him, and subsequently all the travelings and activities at his offices where I was part and parcel of that. So that is the first time or second time I should say, where I had that close relationship with him.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Mr. Jacobs.
Yes.
Now, he's known to have been a renowned administrator. From your perspective, which were the definitive traits, characteristics during his tenure as an administrator?
One should say that Geingob's administration may have started way back during the time of liberation struggle. I will think that even before he left from here, because he was a teacher. And as a teacher, one has to find a way of managing even your class and being able to set certain standards and procedures in place to ensure that your teaching process is done properly. So I think from that time it started. When he left this country and joined other leadership out there, one could see that the time of assignment he was given, he was told to go and study, but he was also told to be the SWAPO representative out there. And what he started with immediately that time shows you the kind of leadership characteristics he had already, and how he led SWAPO to be known in that area where he was, and ultimately the status it got to be the sole and authentic representative of the Namibian people. Is something that the SWAPO party got because of the type of leadership style and characteristic he had. So one would say that he had some unique characteristics that stand out and that one could immediately recognize when you are in his presence.
Against the backdrop of those leadership qualities, which do you believe are the initiatives, the policies that he introduced, that he helped implement, that changed the development trajectory of this country?
You may say that, yes, this leadership style, leadership characteristics, I will again say, started also, as I mentioned in my statement last time, it started with the United Nations Institute for Namibia.
In Lusaka, Zambia.
The director in Lusaka, Zambia, where he set up an institution that will train Namibians. And he made sure that this kind of institution should be there for Namibians to be trained to become the future leaders and administrators of new administration that we are going to start with.
Because the battle was twofold. One, to fight for the country's liberation, but secondly also to empower Namibians through education. Is that not so, Mr. Jacobs?
That is so because, you know, if the leadership style of somebody is especially democratic, that person does not only think about himself, but he looks at what kind of team am I going to have. And since I'm a team player, let me also ensure that those who will go with me and that will take this journey with me should also be empowered. And knowing that we are coming from a background where we did not have training and also equipped with skills.
We were not allowed to have any.
We were not allowed. We were deprived from our education. We were deprived from our basic human rights. So he had to come up with an institution that will empower Namibians to get those skills. So that's how he did it, and he came here, and immediately again, because of his leadership style, because of his characteristics, he was the one that was assigned to lead Namibians into Namibia. Something that our leader, Hage Geingob, also had is that he was in many ways an innovator. There was no plan on which he operated, but he made plans himself. He came to this country, he saw that we were where we were, and he had to come up with ways in which he can put systems, processes, and institutions in place. And the drafting of the Constitution is one way, and also the drafting, there were many people, of course, that you have interviewed who talked to you about the kind of inclusive and also democratic way in how he consulted different stakeholders to make sure that they also feel included in the process. So that was him. He had that kind of a style that made sure that he had to take everybody along to ensure that what we want to achieve is something that we achieve together, rather than him alone, to be seen as maybe one leader alone. He was somebody who took people along. He was somebody that ensured opportunities are there for people to be empowered, so that those who will take up the task will have the necessary skills to be part and parcel of the process, to do their work effectively and also efficiently.
Mr. Jacobs, none of that could have been a walk in the park. It certainly was no small feat to accomplish that and establish that. How do you believe he dealt with challenges?
I think he, in many ways, was also pragmatic, and he looked at issues to say that this is the situation we have. What do I do about it? When we look at the time when he became the president also, it was a very difficult time for Namibia. There were situations, that was the time when we had the global economic downturn, where the economy of all the countries were down, and it affected Namibia adversely, which was also followed by a prolonged drought in Namibia, and ultimately COVID-19 also came in. So he found that kind of a situation. Therefore, when one looks at it, his period of leadership was always full of challenges. But being a pragmatic leader, how did he deal with it?
Let's zoom into one particular challenge.
Yeah.
We also witnessed intermittent labor unrest during his tenure. One such labor unrest matter relates to the civil service. Could you walk us through what transpired under those circumstances and how he was able to diffuse what was potentially an inflammatory situation?
Yes, you may recall that when this issue was raised, that the unions and other representatives of the workers started demanding for increment. Immediately, the response from the government negotiating team was, you all know the situation under which we went through. What I just mentioned of the economic downturn.
Which had resulted in austerity.
Austerity measures and all of that. So that is what they were saying. It is practically impractical for us to talk about increment at this point in time. The unions came back and said that if that is the case, then they started, mooting the idea of industrial action and all of that. And it went on, and through your media, you could see there was tension building up. Again, it was President Hage Geingob who called the unions, who sat down, and ultimately through cabinet, there was the resolution that, yes, increment must be given to the civil servants. And that process started, and ultimately, you know, first, I think they split these increments into two, where first it was agreed that let's first look at the benefits, housing benefits and other benefits. That was, I think, implemented last year. And this year, again, they said, now let us look at increment on salary across the board for others. So I think he was instrumental to avert a situation that could have erupted into something else, because he invited those who were mooting this idea of industrial action. He talked to them, and he went back to his cabinet team. They sat down and they took a definite and a practical solution to this problem. So he was pragmatic. He was a person that averted and make sure that we rather talk, because he, as he mentioned, you know, many a times, dialogue and consultations results in harmony. Lack of discussions results in conflict. So I think that that is the type of person we are talking about.
Would you like to flag more challenges during his tenure and how he had dealt with those?
As I mentioned, this was the time when there were a lot of issues, but one can
external
also think,
issues also.
Yeah, and you know, social issues also. Look at how he handled the issue of the bread and butter issues that we had. The introduction of the food bank is something that was not there, something that he felt will address the issue of hunger and also helplessness and poverty and all of that. I think food bank and also food bank was also later converted into cash payments, and so I think those kind of things help immediately to relieve people on that level of a household level, where people feel the pinch of this impact that has been prolonged through drought, through COVID-19 and all of that. So I think he practically tried always to come up with solutions that will immediately help to change the situation for the better, even to the people on the ground.
What do you make, in your capacity as chairperson of the Public Service Commission, of one of his mantras, namely transparency plus accountability equals trust, on the one hand, and on the other hand, what is it that we need to still do to make sure we live up to that particular ideal?
Public Service Commission is a constitutional body that came about because of the provisions of the Constitution. And there it talks about consultations. It talks about advice that the Commission must give to the President and also to the government. But for Commission, it has always been that as much as we have that mandate, let's consult also with our stakeholders, including our President. And that is what we have always been doing. Whatever Public Service Commission has been, we always make sure that consultations take place, and structures, institutions, and other things that were put in place to ensure we meet our mandate were done because of consultations. One thing that our President always makes sure, and last time when we met him in March 2023, we went to see him to consult.
As a commission?
As a commission. One thing that he mentioned to us up front is, I did not invite you. That was his words. You came by yourself. You know you are independent. I don't want to be seen to be inviting you to talk to you about employment issues. But I think what he was trying to tell us is this body that was set up by the Constitution and that is supposed to be independent and impartial,
and autonomous,
to make decisions, and autonomous, should not be seen to be influenced by
the executive
high officers, and therefore in front of the media and all that, he put that to us.
So you did go there uninvited?
We went there with his invitation, but I think the way he put it is, you requested for appointment, and we granted.
You sought an audience, and I granted it.
Yeah, you sought the audience. It is not like me calling you to come to us. It was through your request for
an invitation.
Invitation that I asked you to come. So I think he wanted to make that clear. And in the process also, he wanted to tell us that, yes, we value and respect your independence as an institution. So he was that kind of a person. And throughout the process of what we wanted to do and how we want to position Public Service Commission to be seen to be the employer of choice on the one hand for the whole government and all the ministries, offices and agencies, we try to make sure that we reach out to all stakeholders so that we don't just sit down in our offices and do work and take decisions. We go out, talk to them, and we tell them, this is the way public service see recruitment processes happening in your ministries. Because we have also that function where auditing of human resource is done from our office into those ministries and agencies. And we go back to them and tell them, this is what we see in your ministry happening.
Just as a side note, help us understand what auditing of human resources in the various ministries, agencies and departments mean in that context.
As I mentioned, the recruitment of a public servant into the government requires to go through different processes. First of all, you have to advertise if there is a vacancy. And then it has to run for a month, and then once it is finished, you look at how many applications came in, and you start looking at them to say which ones can be shortlisted, which ones not. Ultimately, those who were seen to meet the requirements of the advert are subjected to interviews, whether written, oral, or whatever. Ultimately, they are subjected to the test, and the winning person emerge as the winner. This whole process, public service look at, delegation is there. We have delegated to the ministries to do all these processes. But once they have finalized and have identified a given person, they will bring it to the commission to say, this is what we did. Commission, please look at it.
And then the commission ultimately then endorses it, provided due diligence had been followed.
Yes. So commission looks at all these things and say, okay, you have followed all the processes. We look at it. We have policy analysts and other people who look at each and every aspect, whether everything was done above board. And ultimately, the person that was recommended was that person that recommended through proper panel, even the panel composition is what we are looking at.
Mr. Jacobs, you need to come back to talk to us about these critically important matters more.
Yes.
I think part of what it is that we're witnessing is that we are seeing greater transparency, of course, and greater accountability, and I'm sure enhanced trust, thanks to the late Dr. Hage Geingob. As we wrap up our conversation this afternoon, what will you miss most about Dr. Hage Geingob?
I will miss this great leader we had in this country. A person who said nobody should feel left out in this Namibian house. It's a mantra that we should see as a greater vision that he saw is important for us as a Namibian nation. It is not something that he just, thumb-sucked to say it is something, but it is something that we must look at it and re-look at it. Namibia came out of apartheid and total separation of on racial grounds and on other grounds, economic and others. Here we have a leader that talks about wanting us to be in the same Namibian house. We know that we are demographically, ethnically so diverse. So that vision and wisdom he had to bring us aboard is something that we should continue with. We will miss those words. We do not know who will take it further for us, but we will miss those mantra of his. And it is our hope that somebody will take this on and make us to go forward so that we emerge as a nation united and a nation prosperous.
Hage Geingob, Mr. Jacobs.
Geingob, tidak ngicabanga.
Thank you for your service to the Namibian nation.
Thank you very much. Definitely we'll come back to speak more about the public service in general.
We'll hold you accountable.
All right. Thank you.
That was Mr. Saalman Jacobs, current chairperson of the Public Service Commission, as well as seasoned diplomat, talking to us about the late Dr. Hage Geingob as an administrator.